So, I am a big fan, actually, of the Marvel film Ant-Man. I love Ant-Man. I think Ant-Man is fantastic. It's so different from a lot of the rest of the MCU. I love the characters in it. I love the feel of it. It's just a great example of how the MCU knows how to change gears, because not every single movie can be about saving the universe or saving the world. Sometimes you got to change gears and save the neighborhood or save the girl or save the family, right? And when you do things like that and you mix genres, you keep things fresh. And Ant-Man was a great example of that. I really liked Ant-Man 2 as well. Not nearly as much as Ant-Man 1, but I really liked Ant-Man 2 as well. And I got really excited and admittedly surprised, Rob, because I was one of the guys that said, I don't expect them to make an Ant-Man 3. I thought they kind of played out Paul Rudd's story. I honestly didn't expect them to make an Ant-Man 3. And then reports came out that they were doing it. Well, Rob, I also know, whereas I did not expect them to make an Ant-Man 3, I remember in our discussions about Endgame, it might have been Infinity War, where you did expect us to see a certain character named Kang the Conqueror.
Yes, I did.
And of course, that never happened. I didn't think we'd get Ant-Man 3. You thought we'd get Kang the Conqueror. We're just missing all over the place. But one of the shows that I'm watching right now that I'm actually pretty impressed with is the new HBO show, Lovecraft Country. And the guy who stars in it is a guy by the name of Jonathan Majors, who's really, I didn't really know much about him prior to this. He has really impressed me on this show quite a bit. Well, it is being reported this morning, just broke this morning in Deadline, that Jonathan Majors of Lovecraft Country is joining in a major role in Ant-Man 3, in the new Ant-Man. But here's the part. Now, that's big. That's big in and of itself, because I think this guy is great. I'm really enjoying him in this show. Here's the really interesting part, though. The studio had no comment. Remember, this is not Joey Billy Bob's gas station movie blog.fart. This is Deadline.
Yep.
Deadline is writing, the studio had no comment, but sources close to the project say he is likely to play the supervillain Kang the Conqueror. As I bring up Robert Myers Burnett's face just to see that glow of joy coming over him as we speak. They're saying he's, number one, you got the dude from Lovecraft coming in Ant-Man 3. And I guess really story number one is, okay, things are still moving forward with Ant-Man 3. That's good enough. That's good to hear. Story number two, they're adding a terrific talent right now who's in a really hot show in Jonathan. He's joining the show, which is great. And story number three, and maybe the show stealer here, Rob, is that Deadline is saying their sources are telling them. Now remember, this isn't locked. This isn't Marvel confirming this. This isn't locked. But Deadline is saying that their sources are telling them that he's going to play Kang the Conqueror. Rob, if this is true, this raises a plethora of questions in my head. Number one of which is, you're going to introduce Kang in Ant-Man? Ant-Man? Like, if you had told us, hey, Kang is going to be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, guess which movie? Ant-Man would have been like number 17, 18, or 19 on my guest list as to the movie, especially when you consider that Ant-Man, they have used Ant-Man to play small ball, you know, to play save his family, save his daughter, you know, to play that gear shift small ball. To bring in a villain like Kang and to have him be the villain in Ant-Man, a character, Rob, that a lot of people have been speculating could be the next big baddie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe now that Thanos is no longer a player. So we're talking about Kang coming into an Ant-Man played by Jonathan Majors. The possibilities abound. Rob, I was fortunate enough to be the first person to tell you about this, see your reaction, but you've had a few minutes now to process this. What are the things that jump out to you here? Where's your mind going right now when you hear about this news?
Bruh. I mean, this makes me feel very Ghibli, John. Very, very Ghibli. I'll tell you why. You know, I was always thinking that Kang might show up as a second big bad in Avengers Endgame because we knew that it involved time travel. Because Kang obviously travels through time. Do you know that Kang, well, a version of Kang, was even the villain in the X-Men Star Trek The Next Generation crossover comic Second Contact. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's true. That was in the Marvel. Oh, I don't know if it's the Marvel universe, but an alternate version of it. But now that the quantum realm has been established in Avengers Endgame as something you can now use to travel through time, travel through realities, this is the conduit through which Kang is probably going to make his move. And I think who better than, the cast, and we love the Pims, we love this cast. And I think that using the quantum realm, which is now how they've established time travel can work in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this would be Kang's conduit from the 40th century. Kang isn't a superpowered being. He just has incredible technology. And it makes sense. I think it makes sense. I think this is a great way to introduce him. You start slow, or you start with I could see Hank Pym, if they bring Michael Douglas back, meeting Kang and Kang playing himself off as, yes, I'm a great admirer of yours. I'm from the 40th century, and I've, your research has been the cornerstone of what I've done. And really buddying up to him, sucking him in. And then you find out who Kang really is, and that he's this conqueror. There's so many different incarnations of Kang, going back to ancient Egypt and Rama Tut and Immortus in the future. I mean, there's so many ways they could go with this character because he's been so many different things. I think this is a great idea. I think it's great casting. I am Ghibli, John. Ghibli.
Okay, so here's question number one I have for you then. Do you think Kang the Conqueror, again, we're operating on the assumption that Deadline's sources are correct, right? So we're going, and we all have to acknowledge right now that they may not be, that this might be incorrect information. So let's just put the asterisk there saying we're all acknowledging that. That being said, let's go with this for a moment. Let's go on the assumption for a moment that Deadline sources are correct. He's playing Kang. Is Kang a one-time villain for an Ant-Man movie, or is this Ant-Man movie going to serve as the platform to introduce Kang to this MCU universe where he therein goes on to play a much bigger role? Speculate with us here, Rob. What are they going to do with Kang?
Oh, I think they have big plans for Kang. I'll tell you one of the things that they could do. Now, let me fanboy out for a moment. But Kang has a history, obviously, in ancient Egypt. He had an incarnation, Rama Tut. He has a connection to Apocalypse. Now, Apocalypse was the first mutant.
Yes, he was.
And look, this is just me fanboying out, being like, how do you introduce mutants into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Well, you've got the multiverse, and you've got Kang, who can travel through time, and Rama Tut is a big part of Kang's history, and because he is Kang, a version of him, and Kang has a history with Apocalypse. So by introducing Kang, they could show you somehow the birth of mutants on, if not our MCU, a version of through the multiverse. Now, this is totally out in left field, but not that far out in left field. I'm not at the left field wall, John. I'm about halfway between the third baseline or the first baseline and left field, or is that right field? Is right field, depends where you're standing, right? From the plate.
It's all about perspective.
I'm making a bad baseball analogy, but it there's a lot they could do with introducing Kang, because with Darkseid, with Thanos gone, thinking DC fandom, with Thanos gone, Kang is the kind of he's not going to snap his fingers, but he's going to muck around with the timeline. He's going to change reality. He's going to change multiple realities. So I think they introduce him in Ant-Man, and you think that it's just going to be no. I think Kang is going to be if they're introducing Kang, the multiverse of madness, there's all these things that come into play, and I think it's exactly what the MCU needs going forward. They can make definite changes that will not repeat the threat of Thanos, and I think that's really interesting.
So you touched on something there for a second, and I want to explore it, because I heard somebody give a theory the other day that what if, because you mentioned Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
Apocalypse is a Thanos, Darkseid, whatever level character. I would argue superior, but that's just me. That's just me. That like even Thanos. En Sabanur, my friend, En Sabanur. I heard it floated that they may set up that he may not even be an X-Man thing. They may set up Apocalypse as the next big major threat. And maybe somebody like a Kang the Conqueror, because you mentioned the connection that he had there. Maybe he becomes something of a harbinger of something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing going against that argument, obviously, is that by the time Disney acquired Fox, Kevin Feige came out very famously and said, listen, I've already got my next 5 years planned. I've already got my next 5 years planned. And so obviously that didn't involve Apocalypse, but it's something to consider. Question is, guys, and you know what's the unfortunate thing about all this is we're all overlooking the main story here. I mean, you could argue that is the main story, but we're all overlooking that Jonathan Majors is joining Ant-Man, and he himself could be Kang, which is unbelievable because this guy is great. So anyway, guys, the question is for you. What do you think about this news from Deadline? Do you think it's true? Do you think he's actually going to be Kang? Do you think he's going to play a major role in this film? Do you think it's just going to be an introduction for the MCU? 1,000 possibilities. Jump down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Yes, Rob.
I do think it's great casting. I think that's great casting for Kang. I mean, especially, having caught the first 2 episodes of Lovecraft Country now, his performance is great, but I just love his face. And Kang's face. I mean, I don't know how they would do the helmet, and he's kind of got this blue mask on him, but you don't. Yep. He would be badass as Kang. Yep. So I'm down.
There are so many different possibilities here, guys. Question is for you. What do you think about this news? What do you think it means? What do you think it doesn't mean? Jump down to the comments below and leave us your thoughts. And I'm sure we'll probably hear from some of you in the live comments or questions part when we get to that. All right, guys.